Welcome to Season 3 of Alone. 10 contestants have been dropped off in Patagonia. The last one standing wins $500,000. Enough chit-chat. Let's bring out our first contestant, Jim. Right off the bat, he gives this beautiful place a big hug. Creeks, bamboo, mountains, forests. It looks like this place has decent resources. Jim, with an axe in hand, starts a new chapter in his life. His first task? Building a shelter, and this flat spot right here is perfect. As he works, he introduces himself. He's a high school teacher with 8 years of survival teaching experience. A positive attitude, that's his motto for his students. He and his wife never had kids of their own, but they adopted 3 boys, his little treasures. While setting up his tent, Jim fights back the homesickness. With a shelter up, next is making a fire. He scrapes off some fluffy stuff from the bark for tinder. Just a little is enough to easily start a fire. With a fire and a tent, he's set for a safe first night. Contestant number 2, Britt, makes his entrance. He's currently scouting the area for usable resources. But luck isn't as on his side as it was for Jim. The rugged, slippery terrain makes walking tough, let alone finding a flat spot for a shelter. He reminisces about the last time he was in the woods, walking a cat in the meadow with his adorable son. Britt, the strongest accountant in the wild and the most survival-savvy accountant out there. Now, it's his turn to show what he's got. After a long walk, he finally finds a flat area, scenic, near water, with natural green mattresses, but surrounded by tall trees which pose a risk from falling objects. So, he has to move on, hoping to find a better spot. Then, unexpectedly, he stumbles upon a skeleton, a cow's skull and its matching bones, with another jawbone from a different animal. Looks like Britt has wandered into cougar territory. His heart skips 3 beats as fear fills his eyes.
I hear a noise.
10 people surviving the wilderness, and the challenges have just begun. While searching for a campsite, Britt spots signs of a cougar and a pile of fresh wild boar droppings. Looking at the size of these droppings, you can guess how big that pig was. Britt starts to get nervous and begins to set up traps.
So, I just put a little simple slip knot on the end and made a loop. I'm gonna have it hanging head level, maybe a little bit lower.
Alright, that's sorted. Now I just wait for dinner. Then, he randomly picked a spot and threw together a little lean-to. It'll do for tonight. I need to report something. Someone's skinny dipping out there. That free-spirited lady is Callie. Skinny dipping is her unique way of blending into new surroundings. It helps deepen her connection with nature. Next to her is a tent she's half put up. Slow and steady wins the race. That's Callie's way of doing things. Now she's off to make a comfy chair, heading to the woods to chop some bamboo. Callie's been living solo in the countryside. She's in for the long haul, set on bagging that $500,000 prize. She's got real skills. Back on the shore, she's got the chair frame ready. Looks like a lounge chair. Callie's methodically whittling the bamboo, 1 piece at a time. After a busy afternoon, it's finally done. The chair legs look a bit thin, but they still support her well enough. Look at her. All she's missing is a fishing rod. But no rod, just fishing line. She throws the line into the water, then starts gathering firewood. All right, dare to trick me? I curse you to be sent away in the next episode. Chair. Callie, you've got to admit, this place is a real gem. Before she's even done talking, Callie's landed a fish. Cut to the fish already gutted. Let's see what's inside its stomach. A snail, a bit of twig, and a beetle. Callie uses that beetle as bait, and surprise, lands another decent-sized fish. Her luck's as good as last season's Nicole. I just hope she's watched my commentary and doesn't end up like Nicole. Come nightfall, Britt hears strange noises. After listening closely, he thinks it's his trap catching something. He gets up to check, knife in hand for safety, heart pounding all the way. The 3 fish Megan caught last
It's way up there.
can't see a thing. He's just too young and inexperienced. In this situation, I'd suggest it's wiser for him to stick by the campfire. This is Jim's second day here, and the weather's turned. A blizzard is on the way. He needs to hurry up and get his shelter built. He chopped down a few trees with his axe, set up a triangular frame, added about 5 or 6 logs for crossbeams, and finally covered it with a waterproof tarp. This design allows him to build a fire inside the tent, with smoke escaping through an opening at the top. Next, he made a bed out of bamboo, keeping himself off the ground. Not a bad day's work. Overnight passes, and by morning, he looks spaced out. I don't know what he went through last night, but he started talking nonsense.
Day three.
Then, he began to miss his wife and kids. From my experience, this is the rhythm of someone ready to quit. Sure enough, he went down to the river, pulled out a satellite phone.
I'm done. I tapped out.
Now, let's introduce our fourth contestant, Fowler. He might have OCD, shot the opening scene 5 times. His little shelter got soaked last night. Now he's looking to move uphill to a new campsite. The trees lying all over make it tough to get through, but he believes the view on the other side of the mountain will be worth it. While walking, Fowler spots wild boar droppings, and they aren't smaller than what Britt found. He looks around, nerves tightening. Fowler and his wife have a 4-year-old daughter and a little one over a year-old. They live in a yurt in the suburbs, no running water, and don't turn on the lights until it's dark. So every day is about survival for him. Building is the skill he's proudest of. There's nothing he can't make. The prize money could ease his family's struggles for a century. To reach that goal, no matter how tough, he won't give up. Back to the main story, Fowler finally finds a good spot. The fallen tree in front of him is perfect for a back wall, but the daily trek up and down the hill is a challenge. As he hesitated, he discovered some bones.
Could a puma take down a cow? If I move up here, I might be moving closer to his territory.
Looks like this place isn't suitable to live in anymore. Living next to cougars just isn't fun. Guess moving will have to wait. At night, Fowler goes down to the river to fish, aiming to catch 1 fish a day. Suddenly, he hears a strange noise. A pair of eyes watches him from the darkness. Then, they disappear in a blink. The $1 million survival challenge is on day 4, with 9 out of the 10 contestants remaining. This contestant is named Dave. He's showing off even without much muscle. Is that the confidence of sharing a name with last season's champ? Swimming is his every Saturday ritual. It makes him feel at home. Dave's been honing his wilderness survival skills for 20 years, with a record of surviving 44 days in the wild. He's pretty much an old pro at this. He's in this competition to level up his skills. This time, besides their 10 personal items, they got an extra toothbrush. Talk about being cheap. They didn't even provide toothpaste. Dave makes do with charcoal for brushing. He heads to the river looking for food, casts a line, and soon pulls up a fish. He carries his catch back, quickly cooks up a pot of delicious fish, and savors a piece, looking utterly blissful. Meanwhile, Britt's holding his toothbrush, lost in thought, probably wondering why they didn't give out toothpaste. After brushing, he starts his day's work, upgrading the roof to fix a water pooling issue. He saws down a tree for a crossbeam, then tops the beam with moss to prevent puncturing the tent. Here's Megan, the second female contestant this season, walking along the coastline when she accidentally steps into quicksand.
Oh my, I can't even get out.
Right now, she's truly stuck. She really struggled to get out. Her boots were so wet they were unrecognizable. Cold and damp, she reminisced about sunbathing with her family not long ago. And now, here she was getting battered by the elements. Megan is a park ranger and a biologist who's even faced off with bears. Loving a challenge, she kissed her family goodbye, hoping to find herself in the competition. She knows her plants well. The fruits of this particular white bead tree are packed with vitamins. If you come across this plant, pick as much as you can. What you can't eat fresh can be turned into syrup and jam. Right from the start, she began stockpiling food for the winter. I really think she's one to watch. This guy fishing over here is Greg.
Fish for breakfast!
Who's really skilled at killing fish. He threads his fingers through the gills, then twists the head off from the back, and the fish passes on peacefully. It doesn't take long before the fish is grilled. Greg, squatting on the ground, devours it eagerly, then suddenly hears a strange noise in the distance. He quickly drops the fish, grabs his bow and arrows to check it out. Unfortunately, he finds nothing. With no outlet for his energy, he ends up shooting an arrow at a stump just to show off his impressive shooting skills. Greg is from a small town near Los Angeles, where he learned fishing and hunting as a kid. He has 37 years of carpentry experience and is really handy with an axe. He also learned from the locals how to boil water with stones. To maintain his image on camera, he even made a comb to manage his hair and cleaned up his nose hairs with a burnt stick. He says it's the jungle's own way of shaving. His daughter Janet is his only family and his motivation to compete. This is Greg's base camp, close to food, firewood, and water. Truly blessed with the essentials, he peels some moss, dries it, and lays it on planks to make a single bed. Though it looks like a stretcher, it's actually quite comfortable. Before dawn breaks, Zach is woken up by bird calls. He thought he'd escape alarm clocks here, but instead encountered a male bird in heat. Barely making it to daylight, he quickly gets up and collects some bamboo. He's going to make a fishing trap.
And the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to make an M. And in the middle of the M, I'm going to leave it partially open so the fish can...
After explaining the principles, he skillfully started making the trap, knocking bamboo sticks into the water one by one. Imagine, fish swimming in here and getting trapped. Then he covered the trap with leaves, perfectly camouflaging it. Job done. After finishing, he felt a bit spaced out and started missing his girlfriend. As he walked, he found some droppings on the ground, picked up a piece, and examined it closely. It contained bones and hair, signaling he was in cougar territory. Zach looked around nervously, half expecting a big cat to leap down from the trees. 6 days into the Wilderness Survival Challenge, Zach had been hungry for a week without a bite to eat. He checked his fishing gear again, still empty, and dejectedly sat down on the ground, thinking about quitting. But ultimately, he picked up his axe and continued improving his shelter. It was a long trek to find a bamboo grove, and cutting and carrying the bamboo was no easy task, especially on the root-entangled mountain paths where a misstep could mean a nasty fall. After hauling back and forth for 2 hours, Zach's face and neck were chafed raw. He was about to swear but remembered he was being filmed, so he clenched his teeth and forced a smile. By contrast, Megan's smile was genuinely heartfelt. Let's check out her dinner. She gathered orange lichen and charo fruit, planning to brew a pot of health tea. True to her botanist roots, but she knew it wouldn't be enough to live on, so she decided to build a fishing device. She cut a branch to make 2 triggers, tied one end of a fishing line to a bent sapling, and set up the trigger device. Once a fish bites, it would pull the line and set off the trap, achieving automatic fishing. It looked ingeniously designed, but it was uncertain how effective it would be. Meanwhile, Zach was inside listening to the rain. It was his 8th day here, and the rainy weather always made him feel more downhearted. He was already contemplating quitting. To shake off the thought, he decided to get busy. Today, he was going to make a fire reflector.
I'm going to do one here, and then another one over here. And then once I get more bamboo, I just slide them in along that and stack, stack, stack. And then I'm going to tie off at the base up here. So then it'll be a wall of bamboo all the way up, and then hopefully it'll block some of the wind pushing smoke in, and it'll reflect heat back in towards my shelter.
That's a great idea, but it requires a lot of bamboo. Zach had no choice but to hit that root-filled path again. The recent rain made it even tougher to navigate. As he chopped away the obstructive branches, he started to lose his cool again. They say getting angry can mess things up, and sure enough, he suddenly tripped.
Cut myself.
Stumbling, he ran back to the camp to tend to his wound. Then he found a spot with a strong signal and pressed the satellite phone button.
I cut my arm. It just won't stop.
Meanwhile, Greg was plotting to catch a wild boar.
I'm gonna go to one tree. I'm gonna go to another tree on the other side of the trail. Like that, and then that will go to that tree. Take some fish guts, hang it from a line, and when they go for that, they might get...
Once his plan was set, he took off. In the dense forest, Greg mumbled to himself as he walked and quickly lost his way. After wandering around for ages, he still couldn't figure out where he was. Come morning, Britt mimicked his son's dance that he'd performed at his wedding. Switching scenes, he headed to the river to process the fish he'd caught. He chopped up the innards and scattered them in the surrounding waters as excellent bait. Then he cast his fishing line into the river. Sure enough, he soon caught a fish, then a second and a third neatly lined up. Then, swiftly, he chopped off the fish heads. He hadn't even finished the 3 fish from the day when he caught another one at night. While others worried about finding food, he had to figure out how to keep his fresh. Luckily, he found a small water channel, placed the extra fish there, and made a bamboo fence to keep other animals from stealing them. He covered it with a large stone, securing the cool, fresh storage. He proudly sang, feeling like he had already won. Survival in the wild depended on either good luck or a good attitude. Like this lady, who could make even plain boiling water taste like a fish soup. After drinking her water, Callie started building a shelter. She first set up a large triangular frame, then added a smaller one next to it, connecting them with bamboo poles. She topped it off with a waterproof sheet. Perfect. To withstand the storms, she added many posts along the beam and filled them with bamboo leaves. Simple, stylish, and environmentally friendly. This guy without a shirt? That's Dan. He dived into the water and in no time caught himself a fish. He's the 9th contestant this season. As a full-time forest dweller, setting traps is just a walk in the park for him. Check out his trophies, rows of art pieces and animal specimens. They're worth a pretty penny, but he's too attached to sell any of them. That's why he's itching to snag that $500,000 prize. He left his wife and son to come here. Lately, he hasn't snagged any game, just surviving on water. Hungry Dan headed to the river where his fishing line from last night seemed to have caught something. Upon closer inspection, he found the lines tangled, so he stripped down and jumped in to retrieve the fish. When he surfaced, he had a fish in hand. Dan quickly processed the fish, and soon, he was munching on some steaming hot fish meat, filling his belly and boosting his morale. The weather started to cool down, so Callie decided to build a fireplace for warmth. She hauled a bunch of rocks from the river. Initially shivering, she soon found herself overheating as she piled up the stones. The fireplace was indeed very cozy. She gathered lots of bamboo to seal the gaps. Cut to a new day, and Callie was happily dancing in front of her cabin, celebrating the perfect completion of her shelter. Check out her wilderness mansion, white and green exterior, a fireplace made of rocks, a simple eco-friendly clothes rack, a soft double bed, and a solid wood shelving unit. It's fresh, natural, and seamlessly integrated. Tonight marks Callie's housewarming. She moved some charcoal into the fireplace, instantly making the new place feel like home. In contrast, another girl, Megan, had it rough. She stayed alone in a simple tent, constantly adding wood to the fire to mask her scent. After saying goodnight, Megan couldn't sleep, feeling paranoid and peering around, always sensing something lurking outside. Barely making it through the night, Megan finally relieved herself at dawn. On her way back, she stumbled upon some fresh, wild boar dung, less than 10 meters from her shelter. Safety became an urgent issue. She gathered lots of branches and enclosed her shelter, placing a big X at the entrance as if to say, "Keep out. I get it, but I wonder if the wild boar will." Fowler is definitely the top road builder in wilderness survival. To avoid repeating Zach's mistakes, he decided to build a road for easier access up and down the mountain.
And you step on that bamboo as you're going downhill, you might as well step on a slip and slide. It's a little on the dangerous side.
Here's how you'd stick some bamboo into the ground, then weave more bamboo horizontally to make a fence. Once you clear the weeds off the ground, you've got yourself a pretty decent path. Could this path be his winning road? The last one to show up this season is the stunning Carly. She's been busy building her shelter these past few days, trying to mimic a bird's nest. She's from Alaska, a female architect. Building houses and weaving baskets are her thing. This beautiful backpack and the hat on her head, she made them herself. she always wants to use her skills in the wild. Her latest adventure was hiking the Pacific Crest Trail, crossing Washington State. After breaking up with her ex, she found herself here. Today, Carly kept on working on her bird's nest. Just when I doubted the stability of a beam, she did a quick pull-up test to show it was all good. Then she chopped more branches, made a cone-shaped roof, weaving it layer by layer with thin branches. And finally, she covered it with leaves for insulation and warmth.
My walls are strong. Strong enough to climb on.
This failure hit her hard. Seeing her crying and upset, I wonder if she can last much longer in the competition. Fowler, drained from building roads, headed to the river to check his fishing nets. As he walked, he noticed the mountain blocking the sunlight. No wonder he's been feeling down lately. It was the lack of the sunshine of love. Realizing this almost brought him to tears. Chasing after the sun, he made it to the other side of the mountain. Fowler's face was like a sunflower, tears streaming down in the sunlight.
That feels good.
Here we are, day 17 of the Wilderness Survival Challenge. Has Megan lost it? She's holding a big machete. Looks like she's about to do something drastic. Hold on, she's just shaving her legs. After being a vegetarian for 17 days, today she's ready to eat some meat. She heads to the river to check her fishing traps. Her trap did catch a fish, but unfortunately, she yanked the fishing line too hard and it snapped. Megan had no choice but to dive in after it. Braving the cold, she plunged in and ended up crying her way back to shore without the fish.
I lost it. So upset right now.
Megan hurried back to camp, changed her clothes, and warmed up by the fire to avoid catching a cold. Once settled, she couldn't stop thinking about that big fish that got away. Feelings of defeat mixed with loneliness made the night even colder. In the morning, Fowler was practicing his shooting skills, hoping to bag some birds or ducks later on. But after 18 tries, he only hit the target once. Looks like his aim needs work. With no sun in sight and nothing in his pot, he set his sights on a duck at the lake. He tiptoed over, aimed at a duck's head, and shot a stone. Fowler was about to swim over to retrieve it when the duck popped its head up as if to say, "Just kidding, try catching me for another 18 years. Mocked by a duck, he couldn't stand the humiliation. If one plan fails, try another. He decided to build a duck trap and go all out against the ducks. Fowler found a wooden board, sawed a triangular notch into it, and fixed up 2 small boards into a propeller. He then used rubber bands to attach it to the notch, using the rotating force to propel a small boat forward. Next, he chopped some wooden stakes and planted them in the river. After all that work, he actually managed to build a dock, true to his shipbuilder roots, covering all bases.
So, this is what we got going on. As you can see, the propulsion to take it out there. A rock with a line tied to it, 2 of these, and a line to a fish hook in a fish head, which I'm hoping the ducks will take, and which they're apt to do. And then they will tug on it, which will pull the rock off of here because they'll want to get away, and it'll pull it into the water, and the rock will unravel, and it'll pull their heads under and finish them off.
Once everything was set, all Fowler had to do was go home, boil some water, and wait for the ducks to fall for the trap. Hearing a noise in the water, Fowler rushed to the shore only to find the duck trap had flipped over, but there were no ducks on it. This left him feeling pretty down.
It looks like there's a fish tied to the side of it somehow, or something going on.
He quickly gathered up his gear after landing a hefty 22-pound rainbow trout. Fowler gave the fish a loving kiss before sending his little boat of hope out again and secured some food. Everything seemed more beautiful with his newfound catch. Greg appeared, clutching a handful of grass. It had been a while since he had caught any game. To stave off starvation, he decided to make a soup out of the grass. Just after he finished the soup, he nearly threw up. Greg hadn't caught any fish for days and was pinning his hopes on a wild boar trap he had set the previous week. When he checked, The trap was destroyed, and even the bait was gone. What kind of cunning animal could do this? Luckily, he had installed a camera to keep an eye on things. Under the cover of moonlight, a creature that looked part fox, part wolf, snatched the bait and ignored the trap. Back at camp, Greg resolved to figure out a way to deal with this little thief. Britt spoke into the camera, mentioning he was having a tough time adjusting to the local environment, and his kidneys weren't doing great, causing him to get up at night. So he made a simple urinal out of a piece of hollow wood, which worked pretty well. Although usually upbeat, Britt hadn't been able to smile much lately. It had been 8 days without catching any fish, and he had been surviving on grass, having almost cleared the nearby field. Today, he finally found some plantain and beefsteak mushrooms in the hills. Desperate with hunger, he gobbled them up. Constantly eating grass was taking its toll, so he decided it was time to hunt for some meat and set up a bungee trap in the bushes after spotting rabbit tracks, hoping for a good catch. Dave hadn't been seen for a while, but his smile said it all. There was a fish on his cutting board and fish head soup simmering in the pot. He had the fire blazing and had even made a cozy bed. Today, he was making a door for his small shack. First, he constructed 2 triangular door frames from thick bamboo and filled in the middle with finer bamboo. He described it as a sandwich cookie that would better retain heat. After a half-day's work, a semi-automatic door was ready. He installed it to see the effect, clearly enjoying himself thoroughly. In the early morning, Megan went to the riverbank to check her fishing trap but found the fish stuck in the reeds. She had no choice but to go into the river to catch them.
I got a fish. Woohoo!
Before you know it, a steaming pot of fish soup is ready. Megan scarfs down a whole fish in no time. Meanwhile, Greg is still stewing over a fox that stole his bait, which really messed with his boar trapping efforts. He's determined to catch that pesky fox. Greg drags over a thick log and sets up branches on either side to form a V shape.
The idea of the stakes, he has to come in to get at the bait. So I'll run a V this way, a V that way, and just make my row of stakes.
All set for the fox to fall for it. The next day, Greg checks the trap only to find the bait stolen again. It seems the fox has mastered the art, almost like it's raiding its own kitchen. This drives Greg nuts. He's forced to tweak his trap again, this time making a more sensitive mechanism. Surely it'll work now. Night falls, and the fox, knowing the drill, visits again. The same tragedy unfolds. What was supposed to be a trap seems more like feeding time. This totally enrages Greg. Watching the fox's skilled moves, Greg knows he's been outsmarted. A terrible feeling looms over him as hunger and defeat make him want to head home. But remembering his promise to build a house for his daughter, he calms himself down. It's day 34. Britt is mumbling in his cabin, feeling like a remote-controlled car that's lost its batteries, completely out of juice. It's been days without protein, and he's physically drained, wobbling around. Now, he's off to check his traps, hoping to catch a rabbit, his last hope. Climbing the hill with hope, Britt finds his trap made of fishing line has been chewed through by a rabbit. He starts questioning his smarts. His last straw didn't pan out, and homesickness floods back. After wandering aimlessly all day, he returns to his cabin, pulls out his son's photo, and firms up his decision to head home.
This is Britt.
Okay, mate.
I think I'm ready for you guys to come pick me up.
Another one bites the dust, leaving 7 challengers. Lately, Greg has been plagued by the fox and is feeling pretty down. He's just staring blankly at the trap, muttering about his boar and his meat. Driven by hunger, he finally ditches the unreliable trap and heads to the river to look for fish. Squinting, he scans for fish in the river and decides to build a raft to fish in waters across from him. He finds a suitable tree, saws out 2 notches, inserts a couple of sticks, and lays some planks across them. With a splash, he pushes it into the water and climbs aboard. I thought this was going to be a huge project, but it was done so quickly. Greg really didn't have time to waste. If he waited any longer, he might starve. but his makeshift boat is wobbly and doesn't get far before he has to head back urgently. After that trip, Greg's shoes were so wet he could have raised fish in them. Looks like his fishing plans are on hold for now. Let's check in on Carly. She's fixed up her roof. Learning from before, the new house looks pretty solid. At night, she's by the fire, staring up at the sky, reminded of stargazing with her boyfriend, feeling deeply lonely. Some animal nearby must have sensed her solitude, wanting to keep her company. Hearing a noise, Carly quickly stood up, scanning around, but there was nothing in sight. But I just don't get it in such a dangerous place. Why she'd camp out instead of staying in her house. After Greg's first failed attempt at sailing, not one to give up, he found another log and started working on it, believing as long as he could get out on the water, he'd definitely catch some fish. With the last log slotted in, his new raft was ready. This time, it looked a lot more reliable.
We made our maiden voyage in the Titanic. We didn't hit no icebergs, so...
He went to a fishing spot, and no sooner had he dropped his line than he caught a big fish. Meanwhile, Dan dreamt he was sneaking cupcakes in a mall and got chased by security, waking him up in a fright. After getting up, he went to the river and cast a line, soon catching a fish. Keeping an optimistic outlook and managing his energy well, he believes, are his keys to winning. Sometimes he's too lazy to turn on the camera, so there's not much footage of him. These days, Dave's lost more weight, wobbling to the river to fish, the surface starting to ice over, and the fish have moved away from the shore, so he hasn't caught any in recent weeks. He's resorted to eating grass to stave off hunger. There are no signs of rabbits around his camp, and the only thing he can catch is mice. But due to the risk of hantavirus, the show's crew has banned catching rodents. Desperate, Dave ends up screaming in frustration. After calming down, he pulls out his secret weapon, something called the fly, supposedly a fishing miracle. After releasing one, all that's left is the long wait. His 50th birthday is coming up soon. Will he get a birthday gift from above? 2 hours later, he finally caught a fish. Dave couldn't wait to slice open the belly, pull out the roe, and stuff it in his mouth. Delicious enough to make him suck his fingers.